Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we have someone very special, Vaibhav Singh. Vaibhav is the founder of Defensive Offense and DQ News digital platforms, DO News, sorry, with a collective audience of over 2 million subscribers. So, Vaibhav is one of the most popular, analysts of security situations in India. And Vaibhav, we will be talking with him about what's happening here and there. Vaibhav is a respected geopolitical analyst with experience in South Asia and the Indo Pacific region. He's also a regular panelist on leading national media channels in India, where his insight and global regional affairs are widely recognized by all in the country. So, Vaibhav, it's an extreme pleasure to finally speak with you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Vaibhav, I want to talk to you first about we've had not too long ago the war between Iran and Israel, the 12-day war. And I was thinking about the fact that India is our very great friend. We just saw the Prime Minister of Israel congratulate Prime Minister Modi on your Independence Day. It was actually a very cute, nice thing on X/Twitter. And at the same time, you guys have a very close relationship with the Iranians. And so I wanted to ask you just about what kind of a relationship it is. Do you like how do you manage this tightrope of being friends with such mortal enemies, while at the same time actually being their friends? So how does that work, and who is the better friend? Let's say.
Obviously, Israel is a better friend for obvious reasons. For obvious reasons, because Israel has never intervened in India's internal affairs, and neither does India interferes in Israel's. And India and Israel, we both have had different prime ministers, and the relationship has always been good. That's because we both have always respected each other's respective democracies, democratic process, and we two countries are the only countries in our respective regions who can actually call themselves a real democracy. Like in West Asia or Middle East, there is no other democracy apart from Israel. Similarly, if you come to South Asia and this entire region, the one true democratic country you will find is India, where there is a democratic process, there is decentralization of power, and everybody has. We have got freedom of speech. People can criticize the government. People can criticize the prime minister. Up to an extent that some many demand that prime minister should be jailed, and on the other hand they also complain that we are not really democratic. So, and our democratic voices are being suppressed. And if we see in Israel in past 3-4 years, we see a similar kind of a left liberal kind of opposition to Bibi in Israel. And our prime minister also faces similar problems from the left-leaning politicians or the NGO workers or the so-called liberal people who are anything but liberal. But so there is a lot of similarities between both, and we both face similar challenges also. India has been suffering from the radical Islamic terrorism for like past 800 years now, and we have been fighting it off. Sometimes they were Turks, sometimes Mughals, sometimes somebody else, and most recently it is the leftovers in Pakistan, who somehow have got a delusional mindset that they are somehow inheritors of the Mughals and the Turks, when 99% of them are indigenous people converted to Islam. But that's the kind of disillusionment that they have, and they have brought up in the systematically by the respective governments, by the dedicated policy. We go to Israel. Israel is also facing the similar problem. Like the since the very inception, like we all have had wars that were slapped upon us. We didn't want to fight with any of our neighbors, but the Islamist supremacy or the Islamist expansionism and intolerance, that to anybody who's not from the book, anybody who's not from the faith, needs to be exterminated, or they need to be subdued. So that's the kind of mindset that is rooted in our immediate neighborhood.
But
So
Vaibhav, what about the I 100% agree, and I will drill down on the Pakistan. I guess how parallels between what you're facing with in Pakistan and what we're facing with in our region, because I think although it's not obviously one to one, but it is interesting just in terms of the ideologies, the terms. So, but what about the Iranians? So you need them for the oil, especially now with the Russian situation, and no one faults obviously for that. But how do you walk that tightrope a little bit, just on a geopolitical level?
I mean that's pretty simple. It's not that India needs Iran. Iran needs India more than India needs Iran. Okay, Iran's dependence on India is much more compared to our dependence because oil is a commodity which can be brought from any country. There are several oil-producing countries, and we can increase our purchase from one particular. Just like when we got cheaper Russian oil, we increased our imports from Russia because we have got 1.4 billion people. So it's and you know we the government has to look after their interests, their economic well-being, and we need to supply food and we need to keep inflation in control. And in order to do that, you have to keep the fuel prices low. So, and in the kind of environment where there is a volatility in the major oil producing countries, somewhere there is a regime change, somewhere there are different countries where there was a lot of chaos. So, if we got a cheaper alternative somewhere else and it was steady and reliable supply, so we went out for it. So, the India-Iran relation is pretty complicated because if you go to history, no, there is not a single good news that has come out of Iran for India. All right. So,
Or for the world?
uh, so historically there was no such thing. But because there was a cultural trade that went on, so people to people contact. There is a large Shia population here in India. So, so we are connected culturally, but sometimes people don't dig into that root of that history. That every invader that has come out of Iran has made mountains of human skulls in India's capital, Delhi. So I mean that's the kind of news that has always come out of Iran for India.
Can I
So
ask you? So you're saying it's complicated, but more like you guys are wary about historically speaking. Looking back, it's very your eyes are open like on all sides, just making sure it stays safe, so to speak. I guess my
and
question.
also one more thing, sorry to cut you. Iran has also carried out terror activities in India, and the Iranian militias or IRGC attacked one of the Israeli diplomats in Delhi and his wife also, and they stuck a car bomb on her car while she was going to pick up her kids from school, the ambassador's wife. So, that's the kind of activities that Iran has done, which has muffled India-Iran relations a lot in past 2 decades. That and especially after the Khomeini regime came in, although Shah's regime was also not pro-India, it was much more pro-Pakistan. Given the Sunni population that lives in Iran and the Shia population that is there in Pakistan, so they both knew that if we persecute each other's minority or if we don't keep good relations with each other, then there will be insurgency which will come into being. But since Ayatollah Khomeini came in, he has been giving statements on Kashmiri Muslims, that Kashmiri Muslims are being persecuted and all. So India, the people in power in Delhi, they don't like it. So it's not that India has got itself a little away from Iran. Iran has done every trick in the book to push India away from it by giving such statements, involving itself into such certain activities. And even in Hezbollah, in India, the Shia population, there is a large chunk which supports Hezbollah, and they take out rallies which government does not like, and the government understands that all these activities are being done because the mullah regime that is sitting in Tehran, they asked the Shia clerics in India to take out such processions. I remember I was in Kashmir the day Qasem Soleimani was killed in Iraq, not in Iran. So the first question should be asked: what the hell was he doing in Iraq? And but nobody asked that question. So when the day he died, the very next day I woke up. I was going out to cover some stories there, and the moment I stepped out of my hotel, I saw a large poster with Qasem Soleimani, with his portrait on the poster, and people taking out rallies and Qasim Soleimani's posters all across the Kashmir Valley. I saw wherever the Shia population was there. So Indian government does not like it that you should not be interfering, telling our population that you take out procession in the honor of Qasim Soleimani, or you take out procession in the honor of the leadership of Hezbollah or any of your minions that you use to kill innocent people in the Middle East. So so India and Iran relations used to be very good, but now they are. I would suggest that they are practical. They are need-based relationship that Iran needs India, and for the sake of oil, India needs Iran. But the dependence of Iran remains much more on India than India's on Iran.
Can I ask you also, before we go to the war with Pakistan and um, the lessons we can learn and you can learn from each other here, and our help that we're doing each other security wise? You mentioned the left and the constant, I guess, criticism of India, and then within Israel, of Israel, and we have that all over the West too. We all know what we're talking about. One of the things historically that impeded the bettering of ties between Israel and India was this view by the left in India that Israel was part of the colonialist project that persecuted the Indians over the years. The Gandhi family, not Mahatma Gandhi himself, but his successors, all looked in speeches and in the way they looked at the Arab world and at us. In the Arabs were I guess, the locals, and the Israelis were the colonialists. And I think that's just not true historically, but whatever. And now we have a new sort of Indian leadership that looks at it totally differently, right? It's a totally different mindset. Can you maybe talk about, for our Israeli listeners and even for some Indian or Western English speakers, what changed? How do they look at it now?
So the thing is, after India's independence, the Britishers decided that they needed to create a buffer state between the hot waters of the Indian Ocean and the Arab Sea, and the expanding Soviet Union, because in the Second World War, um, the Germans were defeated by the Soviets, not by the so-called Allied forces of US and UK. London used to live underground during that war because the bombs were dropping all over the city, and they did not know what to do about it. And Germans were winning one after another country, and they were taking over. But the Soviets got into the war, and they won it for the US and the European countries. So they knew the kind of strength that Soviet Union had, and the kind of confidence they had gained, and the kind of firepower and the fighting spirit that they had. Because the maximum casualties taken by the country was by the Soviet Union. They lost about a million people, a million soldiers and civilians in the war. So the Britishers and the North Americans, they knew that Soviet Union is a threat, because if they expand southwards and they get to the hot waters of the Arab Sea and the Indian Ocean, then it's game over for us. And the British Empire and its hegemony, or the Western dominance all over the world, will be compromised. So they needed to create a buffer state. So they floated an idea that the Muslims in India are the Arabs. They are a different civilization. They are a different culture, and they cannot live with the Hindus. So they sent one of their minion called Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was, by the way, his closest friend, who was a judge in Bombay High Court. He was his best friend, so to say, because Mr. Jinnah was a lawyer, and they both studied together in London, and they used to have lunch and breakfast and dinner at Lincoln's Inn. So he wrote in his book that the breakfast that Mr. Jinnah used to have was pork sausages and red wine. This was a so
A
you know
very
that
Islamic dinner.
yeah, and he was made the sole spokesperson of the Indian Muslims overnight by the British government. And he started pushing his agenda that that Muslims are a different civilization, Muslims are a different culture. We are Arabs, we are Turks, we are Persians, we are not Indians. Although all their surnames still till today are all Indian surnames, all right, but they refuse, and genetically they are the same people, but they wanted that buffer state. So if you look at the war that has been going on for past 7 8 decades in the region, whether it's the Cold War or the war on terror or all the different wars that the West has fought here in South Asia, the one country that provided base to US or the NATO countries is Pakistan. All right, they always provided her because that's the purpose they were created for. The day they refused, like former Prime Minister Imran Khan refused. He was asked by one of the American journalists, "Will you provide bases once the Americans are leaving Afghanistan, and if they want a base in Pakistan, will you provide one to look over what is happening in Afghanistan?" He said, "Absolutely not." And within 60 days, he was removed from his from his office. So, so the thing is that consecutive Indian governments, because that radicalization was put in the head of all Indian Muslims, that Hindus and Muslims are a different culture, different civilization. So the communists, the socialists, and all these people, they started propagating this in the minds of the Muslims in India, that anything to do with the right wing so-called Hindu or the nationalist Hindu governments, or the patriots, to so to say, or if you talk to a Jew, or you support the Zionist ideology, or you support the Israeli cause, I mean, that's a taboo, and they try to convince each and every Muslim, each and every person from the minority, each and everybody who had a socialist ideology, who had a communist ideology, who was a left liberal. Uh, I mean, supporting so the current the party in the power, like BJP in India, or the Zionist in Israel, or the even the concept of having a Jewish state. Forget about Zionism. The legitimacy or the right for Jewish people to have a homeland. Okay, if you agree with it, I mean, we are not going to vote for a party which agrees to these kind of ideas. So, consecutive Indian governments that came into power in India, they never recognized Israel. All right, 4 decades, 5 decades down the line, when they realized that the current party in the power, it was gaining momentum, it was gaining votes, and immediately after coming in power, the first thing they did in the first time in the I guess in the late 90s was to call the Israeli president to India, and it was the first ever visit by an Israeli president to India. The second time the party came into power, Prime Minister Modi became the prime minister. The first thing he did was he took a trip to Israel, and you must have seen the photographs of him receiving a grand welcome in Israel. He was the first prime minister ever to visit Israel, and most importantly, he visited Israel, but he did not go to Palestine. All right, so he hyphenated both the relations, and so the thing is that the over the period of time, this entire idea, which still persists in India, that if you agree with the Jewish state, or if you agree with having a patriotic government in India, or the right wing, or the nationalist in power, so I mean, it's a kind of crime that you are doing. If you're voting for them, you are an evil person. All right. So they will talk about casualties or the collateral damage which happens in every war, which we have seen in Gaza or in the overall Palestine, but they never talk about the cause of the consequences. All right. So similarly, they call the Indian government as a hawkish government or a nationalist. Nationalist is a word which is a crude word according to the Western mindset, because nationalism means Nazism, but in India, nationalism means loving your country. All right. So in India, when people, when in West you say he's a nationalist, I mean
Not a
it's not
bad thing,
acceptable.
you know.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad thing. But in India, if in India you go to a street and ask anybody who loves his country, what kind of person you are, he'll say I'm a nationalist person. All right. Like I love my nation, so I'm nationalist. That's his basic understanding about nationalism. The complications of nationalism which are created, written, doctorates are being done in Harvard, in Oxford, all these leftist liberal professors telling their students that it's a bad thing, loving your country means you hate other countries somehow. I mean, what's the basis of such ideologies? I don't know. But these are taught. So over the period of time, this relationship has become stronger, and it will only grow stronger. I was sitting with the current Israeli ambassador to India, Mr. Reuven Azar, and I did a podcast with him, and we spent about a couple of hours together, talking about different issues on the podcast and then off the record also. Let me tell you one thing, things that I can share. India-Israel relations and cooperation will only grow stronger in times to come. You will see many, many more Israelis working in India and many more Indians going to Israel. And you have seen that in recent times, many Hindi Bollywood movies are being shot in Israel. So, I mean, a country where you could not even think of going. If so much collaboration is going on, and we'll discuss further in our
And I
in the
just, by the way, Vaibhav, I want to say that I've done a few podcast episodes and interviews in the newspaper I work in about Indians in Israel coming to work here. And on the street where I live right now, when I'm talking to you, we have a number of apartments here for Indian workers that came from India to work here in different sectors of the economy here. And they come here for a few years and then they go back to India. And it's become a real thing. There are thousands of Indian workers that come here for a few years, make some money, go back to India. And the difference is also that in Qatar, Dubai, all these other places, they have these like camps. So you'll be a worker, you'll never meet a local person that's a Dubai citizen. You'll be with the other workers and going from the work site back and forth. Here, they live with me on the street. We're in the grocery store waiting online together and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of it's a new phenomena. It's more and more, you see them more and more all over the place here, and it's actually a very nice thing, I think. I want to just one thing also that's interesting that you said is that the more you are an Indian patriot, basically, is what you're saying, the more you'll also be friendly and more open and sympathetic to Israel. So, meaning the more you love India as an Indian, the more you'll also feel love or compassion or, I guess, brotherhood with people who are in Israel fighting for their nation. So, the more you'll be fighting Islamic terrorism to save India, you'll understand what Israel is doing, if that's your mindset. And that's basically what you're saying. And another question I have about that, and here I'm going to the war with Pakistan that we just also went through, you guys, is that during the years, I remember there was the Delhi attack a number of years back. I actually knew the parents of Moishi, the kid. They were both murdered at the Chabad house, if you remember. And yes, I grew up neighbors with Moishi's father Holtzberg in Brooklyn, New York. So we know them personally, and India at the time didn't really respond. And so one of the things that I remember, and I've spoken, that India was much more reluctant to respond over the years to these types of attacks. They always found a reason to like not do anything. And over the past few years, something changed, right? Something there was like a clicking, and they said, we're not going to tolerate it anymore. You hit us, we'll hit three times back. That's what I've understood. And maybe you can give us a little bit about why this is happening and what it means going forward.
So, India faced hundreds of attacks during uh, from in the 90s and 2000s, the first decade of 2000. India had attacks all across the country, in Bangalore, in Mumbai, in Delhi. Um, you know, No place was spared. North, east, west, south, everywhere there used to be bomb blasts. If you used to travel in the buses, there was a notice which was written on the buses and at the railway platforms that if you see unattended bag or if you see a suspicious commodity, please don't touch it. It may be a bomb. And this was being posted on railway platforms and at different inside the bus, the public transport, uh, by the government. I mean, it was shameful that the government is asking people not to touch anything, because so it means that government has failed to provide security to you, so you are on your own. If you see something unattended, suspicious, run away from there. All right. So that's the kind of government that used to be in power in India, and the mindset in those governments was, or those political parties, because they were the left, liberal, left-leaning political parties. The mindset was the same, that if we do something about Pakistan, or if we do something, if we call Islamist terrorism, I mean, somehow it is going to, cut on our vote bank. Muslims are not going to vote for us. So, so that's the mindset that was there when people were fed up and people voted for the current Prime Minister Modi. And because he said that, okay, because he had contained the radicals in his state, he had delivered that, he told that, this is how you contain the radical Islamists. And his state, which used to have Hindu Muslim riots almost every year since 1947 till he became chief minister, every year multiple Hindu Muslim riots. During his tenure of 10 to 11 years, there was just one riot which happened. That was immediately after he took over. And after that, no riot ever took place in Gujarat. So he delivered on that promise that I'll provide security, and Indians knew that, okay, he had delivered in Gujarat, and he had given development, he had given growth. Gujarat was the fastest growing state economically in India. So they knew that if this man can provide us with security, with economic growth, then he needs to be in the center. He needs to lead the country. So people voted for him. When he came to power, he said, "Okay, I'll work from everyone and I'll appease none." So this was his formula, that I'll not appease any community and I'll work for everybody. So the earlier governments, just to appease the Muslim voters or appease the Islamists or the radical elements or the foot workers or foot soldiers of Islamic Brotherhood, popularly known as Ikhwanul Muslimin, who masquerade sometimes as professors, as doctors, and people say that, he was just a teacher, all right, and how can you arrest him, or how can you do this to him? So everybody was shocked when he won with complete majority, absolute majority. No Indian prime minister had won with absolute majority since 1985. So he was like, all right, so he has arrived, and he started giving back to Pakistan. And since he took over, every time Pakistan did something, he responded. He increased the temperature. He had stepping up on the escalation ladder. Not in the on the first time, he did not start with the these cruise missile attacks and all. He did surgical strikes against the terrorists, and he told Pakistanis that, okay, we did it. Pakistanis are okay, no such thing happened, but okay, because nobody saw it happening, so that's okay. So, but second time they did a bombing in Kashmir. We did, attack on terrorist trading camp in Balakot inside Pakistan, about more than 100 kilometers inside Pakistan. We went in with our fighter jets and we bombed those bases and we came back. Then Pakistan again sent their air force to confront with us. There was a confrontation between Indian Air Force and Pakistan Air Force. Then it was settled down when India threatened that, okay, if you are going to go down this way, then at 9:30 we are going to launch a cruise missile attack against you. Yeah, and this time we'll attack your military bases. So they got, they got a little scared, and then they said, okay, let's negotiate and let's diffuse the situation. It was diffused. Third time, recently in Pahalgam in Kashmir, they again targeted Indian tourists, innocent tourists who were there. There were couples on their honeymoon. There were parents who took their kids to see Kashmir Valley. So they asked what was their faith. These terrorists asked if you're a Hindu or a Muslim, and they said, oh, we are a Hindu. So anybody who said Hindu, they shot him. And they shot the males and told the females that, okay, now go back and tell Mr. Modi that this is what we are going to do to him and to the Hindus. So, which obviously, and at that time, Indian Prime Minister was in Saudi Arabia. He was not in India when this took place. So he cut short his trip and he came back to India. And then India launched attack against all these terrorist camps in the mainland Pakistan, near its capital, in the heart of Pakistan, that is Punjab. And then Pakistan started, doing this, started sending drones and all. Then the Prime Minister said, all right, then let's increase the temperature. So India kept on riding that or getting up on the escalation ladder. We launched our own indigenous BrahMos cruise missiles, Storm Shadow missiles. We took out their Chinese air defense systems. We bombed at least 12 of their air force bases. We estimated losses that Pakistan had to face because of India's attacks in different parts of Pakistan is about 1.5 to $2 billion worth of fighter jets and equipment that they lost. And about 10 to 15 of their Air Force officers and airmen lost their lives. So India, and it's the finally they came, the DGMO rang up and they said, okay, now let's diffuse. So, these terrorists all across the world, all these Islamists, they'll keep hitting you till you try to, negotiate with them, till you try to talk with them. I mean, I have, there were so many agreements that Israel did with its neighbor, from Anwar Sadat to, PLO. I mean, so many agreements. All those agreements were violated by whom? I mean, all these, Camp David Accords, this accord, that accord, so many accords happened. What was the result of that? After some time, some new group pops up and they start killing your people. So, I mean, so the only language they understand is a language of strength, the language of reasoning, the language of peace, the language of, negotiation, or, I mean, these are for civilized people. These are for civilized people, for people who value, like I remember Golda Meir saying that somebody asked her and that when do you think this conflict is going to end? She said that it will end when they start loving their kids more than they hate us. Okay, and and one more thing, when there is one fact that many Indians don't know about. When Golda Meir was the prime minister, India also had a female prime minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and India was having a war against Pakistan in 1971. Uh, Outcome of which was that Bangladesh was formed as an India created a new country by splitting Pakistan into two. East Pakistan became Bangladesh, an independent country with a secular government of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and Bangladesh was, by the way, 52% of the entire Pakistan. So majority left the current country. First time in history where majority said we don't want to live with the minority. And they want everywhere minority asked for a separate country. In Pakistan, the majority asked for a separate country. So India created that, and during that war, India was under sanction because Pakistan was the most was the blue-eyed boy of the United States and the Western power. So the United States also wanted to get involved militarily, and they did send their navy to confront to fight against India. But the Soviets had already placed their nuclear submarines in the Indian Ocean. When they saw that Russian nuclear or the Soviet nuclear submarines, they went back. During that war, India was struggling for supplies because India was under sanctions and India was not able to get the arms and ammunition that were required to fight that war. Indian intelligence agency contacted Mossad. The RLAW contacted Mossad and Mossad contacted the Prime Minister Golda Meir, and they said that this is what Indians are asking for supplies off the books. She said, "Okay, give it to them." And when the war was over, a thank you note was sent from RNAW to Mossad. So they took it to Golda Meir, and Golda Meir said, "Oh, please tell Mrs. Gandhi to remember what we did for her." She did not ask anything in return. She could have asked like, "You are under a war, you need supplies desperately. We'll help you, but you have to recognize us first." She could have asked it, but she did not. She helped India without unconditionally. I mean, she did not put any conditions. And in return, all she said was, "Tell Mrs. Gandhi to remember what we did for her during her crisis when her country was in trouble." So, I
And
mean,
Vaibhav, I
yeah.
don't, let me just be blunt. I don't think Mrs. Gandhi of that generation remembered. In India did not recognize, like you said, Israel until much later, until a different ideology and way of looking at things was elected, and the old guard, so to speaking, changed. And yeah, so you're I guess what you're saying is that Israel and India, even though the politicians might have not aligned all the years, were together fighting these enemies of the same ideological bent all the way back when. And by the way, we're both independents pretty much at the same time. So it's an interesting dynamic where we both kicked out the Brits. Here we kicked them out. There you kicked them out. They left. They didn't want to be here anymore. They want to be with you guys. And
They did not have money. They did not
yes,
have money.
exactly.
Yeah.
And here we were killing them, but that's a different story also. But Menachem Begin was a wanted terrorist in the UK for years, and they had to take it off when he became the prime minister. But so we have a sort of same story, although we're much smaller. So I want to ask you about the in the last war with Pakistan. In a little bit of a continuation to what you just said, I heard, I think even the Indian ambassador in Israel said, or sort of like didn't 100% say it, but like that Israel was helping behind the scenes with intelligence and weaponry to the Indians. Can you? I know we can't speak about it totally, but what can we say about the cooperation behind the scenes?
First of all, the India's ambassador to Israel right now is Mr. JP Singh. Uh, and he was joint secretary here in Ministry of External Affairs. And he was also posted in Pakistan when India attacked Balakot. And just to make the audience understand the kind of significance that the kind of value that Israel holds for India, um, best diplomats of India are sent to countries like Germany, France, Britain, United States, because these are the and Russia, because these are the countries with uh, a one of the most powerful countries where India's economic interests are there, and a large number of Indians live there who send billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of remittances. So India's and they are these are the countries which actually matter in the world. So uh, the kind of diplomats, senior diplomats or the skilled diplomats that are sent to these countries, similar kind of diplomats are sent to the Israel. So India holds Israel, United States, Britain, France, and Germany at the same level as far as foreign policy is concerned. So if you send best of your diplomats to these countries, which includes Israel, so obviously there is something so important because obviously India and Israel are not having a trade of $200 billion a year or anything like that, or there are 2 million or 5 million Indians living in Israel. I mean
We don't
that's
have
not
room.
yeah. I mean you don't have no enough. So, but still, why that category of diplomats are being sent to Israel? That's because the cooperation that India and Israel have, they are in cyber security, it is in defense technology, it is in, you can say, defense modernization. It is there in intelligence sharing, and in intelligence, it is probably as close as Israel-US intelligence cooperation. Okay, so it is very close to that kind of cooperation that India and Israel has as far as intelligence is concerned. That is why during the conflict when India and Pakistan were fighting the recent war, when China was providing all the technological and satellite support to Pakistan. Uh, India has its own home-based advanced space research and a space center, ISRO, that is there. But the Israeli intelligence, the Israeli satellites were also, monitoring the situation. The Chinese satellites, which were interfering in the conflict, those satellites were being monitored by the Israeli satellites. What they were doing, and so real-time intelligence sharing during the conflict was directly being shared between India and Israel while the missiles were going on and off. If Israeli systems were intercepting or their satellites were intercepting the kind of information which India required to or needed to have, it was being shared with India in the real time. So, I mean, that's the kind of cooperation that is unheard of as far as India is concerned, because no other country has ever done that. And forget about this. Even if you go 10, 15 years ago, when India was fighting a territorial war with Pakistan in Kargil, uh, again in Jammu and Kashmir, where more than 1,000 Indian soldiers laid their lives um, to reoccupy the area which were occupied by the illegally by the Pakistani army and the terrorists. During that time, because the kind of terrain it is a mountainous terrain, India did not have the technology or its own satellites to actually know the precise location of the post that were being held by the terrorists and the Pakistan army during in those terrains, and because of which India was having a high casualty. Um, I mean, because we were technically blind, we could not see, where the enemy is hiding. We are on the down and they are sitting on the hill, on the top. And we did not know on which hill, how many soldiers are there. So we needed satellites. And we asked Americans and they refused because again, the Pakistanis were their loved ones. So Americans refused. So, and no other country could give. So during that time also, the Israelis came forward and Mossad provided their Indian intelligence with the precise satellite images of where these bases were and where these terrorists and Pakistan army soldiers were sitting. And India eventually won that war. Um, had Israel not provided that satellite images or that kind of cooperation which was provided by them, our casualties would have been much higher. We would have got those territories back, but at what cost? So that kind of help, saved thousands of Indian soldiers' lives. So Indians who actually know the kind of cooperation, the kind of help that Israel provides India with, uh, they are always grateful. They always show gratitude, and they want this relationship to grow. I mean, but those people who have taken an oath not to think properly or think straight or be logical. Uh, I mean, they refuse. I mean,
Yes.
they are because they are ignorant. That's all I can say, and they love to live in their ignorance. They have created their
Tell me
own
about it. Yeah.
world of that ignorance, and they live in it, and they celebrate whatever they want to celebrate. They celebrate. Can you imagine the kind of people they are? They celebrated in India in Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, which is the mecca of all these leftists in India. Uh, Whenever the Indian soldiers used to die in a war with Pakistan or in again fighting against the communist terrorists who are the Naxals, I mean, they used to celebrate. They used to do parties in the university campus in Delhi, in India's national capital, because they used to believe and they still believe that somehow India is an occupying state over India. The Indian forces are occupiers, and all these terrorists, all these people coming from Pakistan, Bangladesh, or these communist terrorists, these I mean they are the freedom fighters fighting for freedom from whom? I mean, British have left. You are ruled by the government is elected. We have voted for this government. But until unless you vote for the government they want, I mean, it's not the kind of government that represents the real Indian people.
Vaibhav, on that point, one of the things that in the West since October 7th, but we can be honest, way before, but we saw a like manifestation of it in extreme fashion where Jews were being slaughtered, and even before Israel responded, when there was actually still terrorists in Israel territory, because it took time to get them fully to clean out the areas where they were in. I remember I was here that day, and you saw, like, my father lives in New York City, and in Times Square there was protests on October 8th. In Times Square, Israel was still fighting terrorists in its borders. There were still terrorists killing Jews or trying to, and people were protesting. It had nothing to do with the response, which hadn't happened yet. And we see this all over for the past almost 2 years, the entire Western Hemisphere, including, by the way, South America and all these other places. One of the places where I think we've seen it in specific communities in India, specific, more Islamic communities, but in India at large, the Hindu majority, I have not seen a serious anti-Israeli protests. At least, again, putting aside the not small, but the minorities in India, that some of them are Islamic and agree, like you said, with Hezbollah and Nasrallah and Iran and all these people. But mainstream India seems to be, maybe I'm reading it wrong, seems to be innately, naturally pro-Israel. Is that a true reading of the situation?
Yes, if you like 80% of India's population is Hindu, and out of those 80%, 95%, only 5% of the people influenced by the socialist kind of mindset. 95% Hindus already support Israel. And if you see, it is often talked about that, India is the only country where, the anti-Semitism never existed. Why? Because India had always welcomed, when these Islamists actually captured Iran, because they are also not Iranians actually. The real Iranians were the Zoroastrians who currently live in India, and they were driven out of Iran. And when they came to India, they were given shelters. And today, if you see, I mean, India is one of the biggest businessmen, entrepreneurs, scientists. I mean, India's nuclear program. All of them have been these, Zoroastrian people. The Tata is a Zoroastrian person. Godrej is Zoroastrian. New Vadias, Zoroastrians. And by the way, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's wife was also Zoroastrian, and he had only one daughter, Dina Wadia, and her husband was also Zoroastrian, by the way. So, so Zoroastrians have always been, welcome. So every persecuted community all over the world was always welcomed in India. But the problem is when you say minority, I mean that's the
They're a
kind
big
of word that,
minority.
yeah, I mean they are actually the minorities. Muslims are not minority. I mean, when you have a population of about 250 million, I mean, you can't call yourself minority. All right. I mean, Sikhs can call themselves minority. Christians can call themselves minority. Jains or the Buddhists can call themselves minority. How can a population of 250 million call itself minority? And the same community which has partitioned India, divided India into three parts, took two other parts, and still 250 million are still living in India and calling themselves minority and persecuted. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a joke. So majority understands the kind of behavior that they have been experiencing in the hands of these radical Islamists. All right. Uh, there are 250 million Muslims living in Pakistan, 250 million living in Bangladesh, and 250 million living in India. So if you add it up, there are 750 million Muslims living in the Indian subcontinent, which used to be India, and they are calling themselves as victims. So the Hindu, so when Hindus see this, that these are the people who have been killing us, driving us out of our own territory, dividing our country, they have been slicing this country into pieces, taking over each and every slice every 40, 50 years. I mean, so Hindus understand who their friends are, who their enemies are. They now understand that the problem is not the ordinary Muslim working in a shop. It is the ideology, all right, the clerics, the book, where from where this idea is propagated. Hassan al-Banna, all right, he when he started this Ikhwanul Muslimin propaganda, yeah, Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, you start from there. I mean, the Egyptians were 100% Muslims, right? Once the Jews were driven out, I mean, it was all Muslims left over in Egypt. But when Hassan al-Banna came to power, or his ideological followers came into power, what happened? The army had to take over every time. All right? They had to persecute him. They had to persecute all his followers. Why? Because even they knew that these people are dangerous. This ideology is dangerous. The Emiratis understand that. The Saudis understand that. All right? And the Qataris who harbor all these people, okay, who provide with the funding and the request of people sitting in Langley, Virginia. I mean, they I mean, can you imagine the kind of propaganda, the kind of riots? Just 5 years ago, they were rioting all over India, rioting all over India. And all this propaganda was being fed, sponsored by the Qataris. And the machinery behind it was the Muslim Brotherhood workers sitting in Germany and in London. So these are, so Hindus understand, that if we don't support our like-minded people, people who have been persecuted like we have been, people who are fighting the enemies that we are fighting, if we don't join hands, these these guys are multiplying, and we will not be left anymore to live in our respective countries if we don't fight them together. So that's the kind of mindset. That's why the kind of support that Israel has in amongst the majority Indian population. It's because of that. And sensible Muslims who understand the Muslim Brotherhood mindset, and these idiots, they never talk about the Muslims who live in Israel. All right, they never, and they live peacefully. They are not persecuted. They are not hounded. They are not segregated. All right.
They were in the last coalition here for so they were part of the government, in the Muslim Brotherhood Party, actually. Yeah, I want to just maybe just follow that up with: Is there a problem inside India in terms of, is the government, is the majority party, or people like you, mainstream Hindus, Indian patriots? Are you worried that at some point the Muslim population will be riled up to do damage internally? So not just people who are here and there maybe supporting the Pakistani terrorist organizations or all this kind of thing, but something on a larger level which could destabilize your entire country. Because it's so many people, it's so big. If you just had light a match, it can be a very big problem, no?
This episode is brought to you by Ayn Rand Center Israel. We meet every alternate Friday to study and discuss the philosophy of Ayn Rand, author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. The topics range from ethics to politics, reason versus faith, aesthetics, psychology, and much, much more. This is the only place in Israel where Ayn Rand's unique philosophy is accessible to you, and you're welcome to come learn all about it. It's a great opportunity to learn and meet really interesting people. Attendance is free, and first-timers get a free book. We meet every alternate Friday at the WeWork in Sarona Market, and we like to keep the intellectual discussion going afterwards with some great food and drinks. Click the link for more info on Ayn Rand Center Israel.
Yes, the establishment in India also understands the kind of demographic change that is coming in India. The Hindu population is reducing and has been consistently been reducing over the period of time. And the Muslim population has been consistently increasing like a wildfire. The reproduction rate is at least 2 or 3 times higher than the Hindu population. So that Indian establishment understands the threats. So that is why India has been trying to protect its minority, the so-called second or the second largest majority in India, from the radicalization, from the propaganda that has been coming from the clerics sitting in Pakistan and Iran and in Bangladesh. So a lot of YouTube channels which used to operate in India from Pakistan and Iran and Bangladesh have been shut down because all the radical propaganda by the radical clerics used to come from there via internet. So, so I mean, there have been different steps the government has been taking, but my submission on that is that you can delay it. Eventually, you can delay it for like 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. That's the best you can do. I mean, but you cannot make it go away. All right, it will happen. I mean, that conflict will come to being. The last time they were in the majority, they asked for a separate country, and they were not in majority actually. I mean, they were a large minority, considerably larger. So they took out two pieces out of your country, and in future, if they again grow in larger numbers, uh, they'll again ask for it if you don't agree, and they will always have their sponsors, supporters, backers sitting in Pakistan and Bangladesh and in Iran, providing them with the funds and arms and ammunition. So you'll have to eventually confront them, which Indian establishment refuses to, accept because, I mean, they know, but they will never publicly accept it because that's
It's
a
not
politically,
politically correct. Yeah.
yeah, it's a politically incorrect stand to take, and that's the reason.
Vaibhav, lastly, one last thing before I let you go is I'm American born, and even though my entire family, my mom's from Israel, but I grew up in the U.S. until the age of 15, and so you follow a lot about with Trump. You can't not follow what's happening. And I just wanted to ask you, in the last week or so, we've seen maybe a little bit more he's threatening this new tariff regime on India. I think the main reason is to try to get you guys to stop buying Russian oil, but also to punish basically, you know, whatever. What how does the Indian establishment look at the threat from Trump? Because to be frank, if I remember correctly, Modi was called the Indian Trump, and they're supposedly good friends and they get along very well. And then he does this. So, how do you guys look at what's happening with the U.S.?
So Trump has a problem with the Prime Minister Modi at multiple levels. All right. First, during his first term, he came into office with a promise that he is going to stop the war. He's going to withdraw from Afghanistan. He's going to withdraw from different places. When he wanted to withdraw from Afghanistan in his first term, he asked Indian Prime Minister Modi to replace American soldiers with Indian Army soldiers. All right, and he promised that he'll give India a lot of good deals. He'll give India billions of dollars, and he'll open up more markets for India. And India can have all the stars and moons that India wishes for or India asks for. Prime Minister Modi took a stand, and he said that it's not India's war, and Indian men and women will not fight and die protecting American interest in a third world. All right. So we are not. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for
But
your
no,
offer.
thank
But
you.
yeah, but no, thank you. We are not going there. Indian armed forces were ready. Indian armed forces said that if government in power orders us, so if they or because it's there in their oath for Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force, the oath is same that we'll go to wherever, however, the government of India sends us by land, by sea, or by air. That's the oath that they take while they join the armed forces. So Indian armed forces were ready. They said, "Okay, if government says, we'll go." But Prime Minister took a stand and he said, "Our kids will not die for somebody else." All right. So that was first instance that Trump, somebody in world said no to Trump, and and then Trump said, "Okay, do one thing. You are looking for a fighter jet, I heard. So Lockheed Martin has, improvised F-16 and made it turned into a new fighter jet called F-21, which is almost fifth generation. It has capabilities that are at par with F-35. And if you agree, I'll ask Lockheed Martin to shift its entire manufacturing of F-16s from Texas to India, and you all your fighter jets will be manufactured in India, and also the country's like F-16 is the most successful plane ever built, fighter jet ever built. So it has a supply chain spanning more than 100 countries all over the world. So you'll get also the supply chain of such large extent, and you'll be making billions of dollars worth of sales there also. Uh, but Indian Air Force said no, we are going for Rafale. We think Rafale is com- yeah, comparatively better to a modernized F-16s. So if we want something at par with F-35, we'll buy F-35. Why do we have to buy F-21? So India, then Prime Minister Modi said no again, and then he got out of power. When he got out of power, Joe Biden came to power and he withdrew from Afghanistan. And the power vacuum which was created, which Donald Trump wanted India to fill up,
The
was there.
Taliban came back.
Yeah, and Taliban took over within 24 hours since Americans took over. So, so he had a grudge that okay, I came to power, committing, promising that I'll withdraw from Afghanistan, but it is Joe Biden who withdrew from Afghanistan, and I could not withdraw because Indians or the Prime Minister Modi did not let me. All right, he did not agree to send his men to Afghanistan. This time he had he still has a grudge with Barack Obama. I mean, his cutthroat enemy actually is Barack Obama. It was never Joe Biden. So Obama used to make fun out of Donald Trump in public events. You must have seen videos at the Met Gala here and there, and he used to make fun of Donald Trump when it was rumored that Donald Trump may run for president. And when he was made fun, or Barack Obama made fun of Donald Trump, he took it personally. So Barack Obama was president twice. He wants to be president twice. Barack Obama won Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to have a Nobel Peace Prize. So he wants to level it up to Barack Obama. So a so-called possible war between two nuclear-armed nations where nuclear weapons were about to be used, um, and then Donald Trump stepped in and Donald Trump stopped it, and he stopped it, and Prime Minister of India says no, he's not who stopped it. Actually, it is the Pakistanis. They called us. We have the record when they called us requesting to ceasefire, and we agreed to it. And then the Pakistanis went to Donald Trump and said, "Sir, we have agreed to ceasefire. You can take credit for it." So Donald Trump took credit for it, and Indians were caught by surprise. That okay, so I mean, Pakistanis played it really well as far as their cards were concerned. They requested India for a ceasefire. When India agreed, the second call they did was to Donald Trump, sir. Because of you, the war has stopped. So thank you very much, and we are really grateful. You can take the
They
credit
knew
for
how to
it.
play him, you're saying. They knew how to play his
Yes,
ego.
because they have been playing with them since Cito, Santo in the early 1950s till today. They have been doing all the dirty work for them. They have been doing all sorts of things that these Americans have been asking them to. So they know how to play with them. So they played it, and India still refuses. So this is I mean Donald Trump has said it 28 times now that he stopped the war, and India has refused it 28 times straight.
So every time he says it, India puts out a public press release saying, no, it wasn't him, it was us. It was part
Yeah.
of our. It
So,
really is
so
true that every time, let's say in a press conference, he'll say something, the Indian, I guess, Foreign Office will say, no, it's not true.
yeah. So Donald Trump is really pissed off at India that, and he all he wanted, okay, just say that yeah, Donald Trump stopped the war, and Pakistanis have sent a letter of recommendation recommending me for a Nobel Peace Prize. You also issue a statement, a letter for recommending me, and this tariff war will be over. I mean, it's not about Russia or India buying Russian
It's
oil.
all personal.
It's personal, and India is not going to stop buying Russian oil. By the way, I mean the kind of tariff that he's putting in. I mean, the kind of money India is making out of buying cheap oil, it can be subsidized from the profit that India is making there. So Indian government knows, Indian diplomacy knows how to operate, how to work it out, and we it's like you have the watch, we have the time. Okay. So we have the time. I mean, we can sustain. And remember that India is a country which was fighting United States for literally fighting United States for 5 decades. And still we managed to make our nuclear bomb. We still managed to build our space research center. We still managed to build our the ballistic missiles. We still managed to build our satellite space centers, this and that. Everything we built was under sanction while we were under sanction from United States. CIA murdered dozens of Indian scientists who were trying to make a cryogenic engine. They, falsified cases against Indian scientists. They pressured Indian corrupt politicians to act against Indian scientists working on advanced projects. I mean, they have done everything, and if they could not stop India from achieving what India has achieved, I mean, current India-America relations are very strong, and they were built on confidence over, and these relations are built um, on the base on a base that is mutual interest, mutual. I mean, both are democracies. We have shared values. Okay, and so the only problem is this one individual, all right, and the audacity of India to say no. This is something people sitting in America don't understand. Like, how can a country like India say no to us? And they have been, and I'm like, why do you guys act surprised? India has been saying no to you for past 7 decades now.
But
Get
I have
used
to
to it.
say, I just want to say one thing, and I think you'll agree with me about this, is that and I've spoken to a number of experts on India, and every one of them says that there is a sort of more national confidence that you have not had over the years in the past decade or so. There's a sort of people are proud to be Indian. They feel confident. They feel like that India is becoming a player on the world stage. I think you're the sixth biggest economy in the world at this point. You're growing. The poverty levels, they're still high,
We
but
are
they're getting
we are
better.
fourth biggest. We are fourth biggest economy.
Fourth, sorry, sorry. But my point is that that there is the national confidence, the psyche of the people is something that maybe Americans and Westerners still haven't caught on to the fact that Indians are confident to tell other countries no because they know their self worth that they didn't maybe know a decade or two ago. It's a different type of psyche. That's like my last question. Is that something that you feel also from India?
Yes, and I mean there has been a rise in India's confidence. Not India as a nation, but every Indian is now much more confident. He looks at future with a lot of expectation, and he understands that okay, I can achieve something in life. We can do much better things when Indians see India sending satellites on Mars and on the moon, and India launching a satellite called Aditya, observing sun to observe sun. I mean, these are the things that gives Indians a lot of hope and confidence that okay, we can achieve a lot more than, and our self worth, our potential is still very much untapped. So we need to work harder. We can do it. So this. I mean, and it has always been there. That whenever India has been tried to be bullied by anybody, the Indians have always come together. Historically, also, Indians have always come together because majority of Indians they don't compromise. They can fight with each other on different issues, but when it comes to India or the nation, I mean, they set aside their differences and they unite against that one enemy, so to say, or the kind of adversary that we are facing. If I'm not going to use, because obviously I'm not going to use the word of enemy for United States. We are allies, and but whenever America behaves in a way of an adversary, Indians will always unite against it. Indians will always come together. So And Indians know that America does not have option apart from India also. The Indian middle class is based on some 700 million people, all right, with a purchasing power to buy American goods. So I mean, if you want to abandon a market of 700 million people, be my guest. So Indians know that America also does not have many more options. America also does not have a market of 700 million people, current market. And out of 1.4 billion population, there are hundreds of millions who are going to get added in this category in coming years because given the rate of growth that India is having, the GDP growth rate, India is growing consistently at 8 to 9% every year. So a lot of more hundreds of millions are going to get added in this 700 million. So if America wants to abandon that market, please do it. But Indians know that Americans are not fools. The American businessmen are not the fool. They will not let Donald Trump spoil or screw the head roads that they have made over decades. The diplomats who work in American foreign service, they are also not going to allow Donald Trump to spoil the hard work that they have put in into for like past 2 3 decades to build India-America relations. So I mean, so I'm very hopeful in Indian.
You're not too worried, basically.
I'm not worried. Nobody in India
But
is
I
worried
would just
actually.
say one last thing about what you just said, that if America's main competitor on the world stage is China, and you're trying to wean off and isolate China, putting tariffs on an ally that can be a market that you can tap into as opposed to the Chinese, and you don't want to push the Indians into the Chinese hands, this is a very dumb decision. So my point is
Yes,
that
and
if you're,
this is sorry, Ariel, and this is something that they have already done with Russians.
yes,
Many Americans and people like us here in India have been saying and arguing that don't corner Putin, don't corner Russia, don't go after them, don't push them to the
into the
corner.
Chinese hands.
Yeah, because the more you push Russians to the corner, the more they will go to the Chinese camp. And today, you see, all Chinese defense equipment, Chinese air defense systems are based on what? On the Russian technology. They simply remastered the technology Russians provided them with because they were short of money, they were short of resources, so they had to let it go. They had to sell it to the Chinese. So now they are completely dependent on China. Russia and China used to fight war over territories. And today, I mean, they are one of the closest allies. All credit to US foreign policy. So if you want to push India, which India will not get pushed, obviously, because
But
India
just
has
as a concept,
yeah, but
yeah.
and India will have to eventually cooperate with them in the areas where India does not want to cooperate with them because you are pushing India towards that.
Vaibhav Singh, we can go on for hours, but it was a
Yes,
pleasure talking to you. I have to
same
say,
here.
it's always hopeful to speak with friends in India because we look at Western media, we see what's happening in Europe. I have friends that live in London. It's scary to walk out with a kippah and all
Yeah,
this kind of stuff. And then you speak with people in India and you see we do have friends. We have mutual, you know, interests, but also mutual ideals and mutual um, enemies. And
yes.
it's something that we have to get into our heads, and so it gives me hope. So I thank you so much for being with us, and the guys, if you have questions for Vaibhav, put them in the comments. The good ones I'll hopefully pass on to Vaibhav. Whatever he wants, he'll answer. And follow Vaibhav on his platforms. Like we said in the beginning, over 2 million subscribers to your various platforms, and he has amazing interviews. He just interviewed not so long ago the ambassador of Israel in India, which we mentioned in our conversation. It's a very good talk, which I listened to the whole thing. So very good stuff. And so, Vaibhav, pleasure talking to you, and we will see you next time you come to Israel.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Thank you for having me, and it was a great experience talking to you. And shalom to everybody listening to me in Israel.